All right, welcome everyone. My name is K. Michael Russell. I am a comic book colorist, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So we're going to do a good old-fashioned tutorial today. So this lesson is going to be on bounce light, or reflected light. I guess it depends on what the situation is. But I've got an example here. This is from Postal 23, page 9. So when I say bounce light, what I mean here is this stuff right over here. Okay, so my main light source is coming in from the top left, pretty strong right here. You guys can see all that. And then on this side, there's this little bit lighter light over here in the shadows. Now it's not as bright, of course, as the main light source, but this is reflected light. And there's a lot of ways to think about this. I want to tell you guys an easy way that works for me. And obviously, if you come across something better or if you hear something different elsewhere, by all means, do it. I'm not saying it's the only way, it's just a way. And I think it makes sense to me. And I'm going to use an example that doesn't have any bounce light. This is also from Postal. This is from number 24. And there's really just one main light over here, obviously on the right side, and it's just shadows, so it's really just the two tones. And there's a little bit of brighter, these little white spots you guys can barely see. But so the way that I think about reflected light is, number one, what's the overall color of the environment? Okay, because that's gonna determine what color your bounce light is. Or, are there, if she had a big red rubber ball right next to her face, then that's going to change, the color of the bounce light. And so what happens, I'll give you guys a quick example here. Let's do that. So there's whoops, let's get on the right layer. So let's say there's a big red ball that for some reason is sitting on her shoulder. Now that doesn't make any sense at all, but let's bear with me here. If I was going to light this side of her face, thinking about this super red ball that is right next to her. So here's what's going to happen. So the light's going to come in, and it's going to start bouncing off this ball, okay? And some of it is going to bounce back and hit her in the face, and under her hair maybe, and on her neck, and really on her, on her shirt and whatnot here. So let's get rid of all that. So I'm going to think of bounce light as something that is, number one, it's contained within the shadows here, okay? Because that reflected light is not really going to be bright enough to show up in the areas that is a pukey color, that already had this really bright light, because it's just not going to be strong enough. It's a much weaker light, so it's really only going to hit the shadows. Now, the way that I think about reflected light is, I think about it as it's any other light source. It's just weaker, and it's not as strong. So if I've got a light source right here, let's say, then what parts of her face are going to be lit? So let's just start. We're going to get a rough shape kind of doing this thing. And maybe on this side of her nose a bit. And you'll notice that I'm not overlapping into the lit area, right? I'm leaving some space here. That's actually called a terminator, and it's where the light sources are coming together. And if you read a lot of comics, you'll see a lot of those. But it happens in reality too. Where else? Underside of her eyelids here, maybe. Okay, so for her face, that's close enough. So, all right, so I'm going to pick my light source color, which is this red, and I'm just going to brush this in lightly. Now this effect is too strong, and I've got it on a separate layer right now. So I can lower the opacity and turn this down. And that's probably in the ballpark of what would happen. And I'm going to do the same thing like on her neck here, and I'm just doing this very quickly. Grab all of this around the shoulder. I'm going to paint a little bit more there because it's really close. So I'm thinking about that light, emanating from that red ball, basically. Now, that's usually not the situation that you're going to see this, but I wanted kind of an extreme example to show you guys one way to do that. So let's do this without a giant red ball. So I'm going to back out and look at the whole scene here. and I'm covering a spoiler. Hopefully I don't accidentally uncover that. So what would I do in a more subtle way? Now I'm going to pick the same area, okay, because, or a similar area, because now in reality here, that shadow is going to be getting bounce light from all over the place, from the ground, from the sky, from the surroundings, all these different things. So I'm just going to think about selecting areas that are generally opposite of the main light source. Okay, so same thing kind of applies here. I'm going to grab this left side again, and we'll get the area under the ear again, and the nose. All right, so I'm going to pick my shadow color, and I get this really desaturated green, almost gray. Now if it's a bounce light, it needs to be brighter, and I'm going to saturate it a little bit, because so I'm going to get a little bit brighter, just barely, and a little bit more saturated. Now the reason for that is skin tends to get more saturated when it's lit, so just a little bit of saturation there. And I'm also going to shift this a little bit more toward the blue. Okay, nothing crazy, but more blue than yellow. And the layer's in normal mode. This is a separate layer, and I'm going to paint this in. And I think that works pretty well. If it's not what I like, let's say if I go back, I can just go back to that layer, and we can mess around with the color here, make it a little bit more yellow or blue or whatever. I think a little bit more blue works. I could brighten it, I could darken it, whatever, but right about there. Okay. So even if you only create that new layer long enough to find this color, you can always merge it back down then, but now you've got your color, you know. So if you were gonna, you know, render other places, then you've got that as an option. Make sense? Hopefully it does. So the important thing to remember, I guess, is a couple of points. Don't let your bounce light come over your other main light sources. It should never be as bright as your main light source, unless you've got some interesting situation where you've got two flashlights or something. I don't know. But most of the time you want one obvious light source to make that work well. And then your other bounce light or reflected light, it's going to be a lot dimmer and just a little bit brighter. And if you go back and look at my original here, I've got again, the really bright yellows over here, and just a little bit brighter than my base color here. So it's barely moving. And in case you're wondering, someone's going to ask, there is an overlay. Nope, where is it? There we go. There's a little bit of a glow happening on this. And again, because skin is so reflective and you've got a really bright light on it, sometimes I'll get like a hard light mode or overlay or something, and put a really soft light over the lines. So you're getting that little bit of reflection that kind of looks like it's like a glare almost, because skin can be pretty reflective in some cases. So if you guys have questions, feel free to use the comments. And if you want to learn more about this stuff, be sure to check the description for links to my coloring courses. I have to remember to start saying courses now instead of course. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.